All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going on a tour of the most advanced piece of technology on the planet, your own body. And to wrap our heads around it, we're going to use a really cool metaphor. Think of your body as this high-tech facility with a super sophisticated control room running the show and a massive power plant keeping the lights on. So let's get started.
I mean, have you ever really thought about that? How does the feeling of a cool breeze on your skin turn into an actual thought? Or how does that lunch you ate become the fuel you need to, well, live your life? The answers are all about two incredible systems working together, perfectly in sync.
So first up, let's head into the command center. We're talking about your nervous system. This is the unbelievable network that's coordinating literally everything you do, from breathing while you sleep to figuring out a tough puzzle. It's where your thoughts, your feelings, your memories, it's where you happen.
Now, at its core, this whole system is split into two main departments. You've got the central nervous system, that's the CNS, which is basically the main office, your brain and spinal cord. This is where all the big decisions get made. And then you have the peripheral nervous system, the PNS, which is like the network of field agents, all the other nerves branching out, carrying messages from headquarters out to the body and from the body back to headquarters.
So how do all these messages actually travel? Well, they zip along these amazing specialized cells called neurons. And honestly, the easiest way to picture a neuron is to just think of it as a biological wire. It's designed to carry these tiny little electrical signals from point A to point B, making up the literal wiring for this entire body-wide network. But here's the wild part. These wires, these neurons, they don't actually touch. There's this microscopic gap between them called the synapse. And this tiny little space is where the real magic happens. When an electrical signal hits the end of one neuron, it triggers the release of chemicals that float across that gap and spark a whole new electrical signal in the next neuron. That's how a message can travel across billions of cells in an instant.
Okay, so now let's zoom in on the heart of the whole operation, the absolute center of the control room, the brain itself. This 3-pound marvel is running everything that makes you who you are.
You can kind of break the brain down into three main divisions. You've got the cerebrum, that's the big wrinkly part on top, and it's responsible for all the high-level stuff, your thoughts, your emotions, your senses. Then, tucked underneath is the cerebellum. Think of it as the coordination department, handling your balance, posture, and smooth muscle movements. And finally, you've got the brainstem, which connects the brain to the spinal cord. It's the unsung hero, managing all the automatic things you never think about, like your heart beating and your lungs breathing.
And this brings us to something you've probably heard about, the whole left brain, right brain thing. That big cerebrum is split right down the middle into two hemispheres, and each side has its own specialties. Generally speaking, your left brain is your logic center. It handles things like language, math, and writing. Your right brain, on the other hand, is the creative hub. It's all about artistic skill, spatial awareness, and musical talent. And of course, they're constantly talking to each other, working together as one team.
If we zoom in even closer on the cerebrum, we see it's divided into 4 different departments, or lobes. Right up front, you have the frontal lobe. That's your CEO, in charge of personality, problem-solving, and planning. Then you have the parietal lobe, which processes sensations like touch, pain, and temperature. Way in the back is the occipital lobe, which is the dedicated visual processing center. And on the sides, the temporal lobes are key for hearing, understanding language, and forming memories.
And tucked away deep inside this whole control room is this tiny, little pinecone-shaped gland that has a massive job, the pineal gland. Just think of it as your body's master clock. It's the thing that produces melatonin when it gets dark, which tells your body it's time to sleep. It's in charge of your entire sleep-wake cycle, what scientists call your circadian rhythm.
Okay, a control room is amazing, but it's completely useless if it doesn't have power. So, where does all the energy to run this unbelievably complex command center actually come from? Well, that brings us to the second half of our tour, the body's ultimate power plant, your metabolism.
Now, metabolism is a word that gets thrown around a lot. And it's not just about how fast you burn calories. It's the sum total of every single chemical reaction happening in your body that keeps you alive. It's the whole process of taking the food you eat and turning it into two things: usable energy and the physical building blocks your body needs to grow and repair itself.
Really, your metabolism is this constant balancing act between two opposite forces. On one side, you have catabolism. That's the process of breaking down big, complex molecules from your food to release their energy. You can think of it like demolishing a building to get the raw bricks and steel. Then, on the other side, you have anabolism. That's where your body takes that energy and those raw materials and builds the new complex things it needs, like new muscle cells. It's this beautiful, constant cycle of breaking down and building back up.
So how on earth does your body take things as different as a piece of bread, an avocado, and a chicken breast and turn them all into the same kind of energy? The secret is something called the citric acid cycle, or as it's more famously known, the Krebs cycle. The best way to think of this is as the central furnace of your cellular power plant. It's the final stop where all these different fuel sources, carbs, fats, and proteins, end up, ready to be converted into pure energy.
It's this incredibly elegant series of chemical reactions that just systematically pulls the energy out of your food molecules and stores it in another molecule called ATP. And you could think of ATP as the universal currency of energy in your body, like tiny rechargeable batteries that power absolutely everything. Every time a neuron fires in your brain, every time a muscle fiber contracts, it's all paid for with ATP.
So you've got your control room and your power plant. They're both amazing. But what happens when the communication line between them gets fuzzy or the power supply starts to flicker?
Let's take a look at the thyroid gland for a perfect example. This little gland in your neck acts like the main thermostat for your metabolism, telling your power plant to speed up or slow down. And when it starts to malfunction, you see the effects ripple through the entire body. It's a powerful reminder of just how connected everything is. For instance, if your thyroid is underactive, that's called hypothyroidism, your whole system slows way down. You feel tired all the time, you're sensitive to cold, you might gain weight, and it can even lead to depression. But if it's overactive, hyperthyroidism, the power plant goes into overdrive. Now you can't sleep, you're anxious, you're losing weight, your heart is racing. One little glitch in the power regulator throws the whole facility into chaos.
The complexity we've just scratched the surface of it's mind-blowing, right? Which kind of brings up a big question. How do we even know any of this? Well, a huge part of the answer is our ability to actually see it.
This quote just nails it. At a fundamental level, our brains are wired to process visual information. We don't really think in lines of code or paragraphs of text. We think in pictures, in patterns, in connections. And that's exactly why being able to visualize these insanely complex biological systems is so incredibly powerful. And the data totally backs this up. We remember what we see way better than what we just read or hear. Visuals, like the ones you're looking at right now, help us make the unseeable things like a neuron firing or the Krebs cycle turning visible and understandable. They cut through the complexity and make this stuff way more engaging and easier to hang on to for pretty much everyone.
Which brings us to one last really big idea to chew on. We can map the lobes of the brain, we can trace these crazy metabolic pathways, but as our tools for visualizing all this stuff get better and better, are we just learning about the body's mechanics? Or are we actually getting closer to cracking the biggest mystery of them all, how this incredible dance of chemicals and electricity creates consciousness, the very essence of you and me? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.